Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, we will be adding the JavaScript functionality to make the BMI calculator work. JavaScript relies on HTML and sometimes CSS to be in place before it can work. So we've already got CSS and we've also got HTML already in place. So let's go ahead and add our JavaScript. So this is our code so far. This is our CSS and this is the HTML. So let's add our JavaScript. We've already made a reference to our JavaScript inside our HTML file, courtesy of the script tag here on line 32. So to create a new file, I click on File, I'll go New, and I'm going to save this as a JavaScript file. So I'll do File, Save As, and it's going to save into the same directory as our CSS and HTML. I'm going to call this bmi.js, and in the drop down I'm just going to select JavaScript, which is this one here, and I'll click Save. So the code I'm going to be adding into this file is going to be JavaScript. You can see on the bottom right here it says JavaScript. So I've already pre-staged the code. I'm going to add it on and I'll explain the code line by line. So here I have added the JavaScript code that will make the BMI calculator work. So let me run through the code with you. On line 2 here, I've got a comment. So anything that is a comment is ignored when the code executes. So this is a JavaScript comment. So this is what is known as a single line comment. So when the code runs, it will just skip this comment and ignore it. The comments are useful because they help you explain your code to yourself and also to others. So here on line 2 is what is known as the formula for calculating the BMI. Okay, so here the W is the weight. So basically the BMI formula is kilogram divided by height over 100 times height divided by 100. Okay, so this is basically how you calculate the BMI. You do this bit first, which is in parentheses, the height divided by 100 times the height divided by 100, and then you divide that value by the value in kilogram. That will give you the BMI. So this kg basically is the weight. So this is the weight. You're dividing the weight by the height. So line 4 here, we're using the document.getElementById method. And inside the parentheses, we are passing in submit. Submit basically is the button here, which is inside our HTML document. If I scroll down here, you can see this ID submit. That's what we're referring to inside this here. So we're passing in the submit, and we have also got an event listener. So here we've got the add event listener. The document.add event listener, basically this is a method that attaches an event handler to the document. And you can see we are attaching a click event to the BMI calculator. Okay, so here now, what we're saying here, the event we are attaching to this is the click event. And when the button is clicked, or the submit button is clicked on, it will call this BMI calculator. All right. This is a function which I have defined here on line 5. So I've defined a function called BMI calculator. And here we've got some variables here, variable centimeter, and we are setting that to equals to parse int. The parse int basically is a function that parses a string and returns an integer. Okay, that's what we're doing here. So we're passing a string but returning an integer. Integer is a number, and we're using the document.getElementById, and the ID we're getting is the CM. Again, if we go into our HTML, we can see the CM here refers to the input. So this input here, and this is the value. So any input that is entered into that text box is what is going to be converted into an integer value, because the actual text box is a text. So we're going to convert it using this parse int. Here we've got a variable called kg. We're using the parse float. The parse float function parses a string and returns a floating point number. This function determines if the first character in the specified string is a number. If it is, it parses the string until it reaches the end of the number and then returns the number as a number and not a string. That's what the float does. Line 9 here, I've defined a variable called BMI and a variable called new CM. I'm setting the value of this variable here called new CM to parse float, and I'm passing in the value in centimeters divided by 100. Here, this BMI here, variable BMI, I'm setting that to equals to the kilogram, which is this variable here, divided by this value, which is this variable here, times this variable here as well. Here on line 13, again, the value of this BMI variable is going to change. I'm going to set the value to equals to the BMI dot to fixed. Basically, the to fixed method is used to convert number into a string, keeping a specified number of decimals. In this case, I've passed it 1, so it will have 1 decimal place. Console.log, you don't necessarily need that. This basically is for troubleshooting purposes. So when you run your application, you can see the value also of the BMI inside the console. So this is not mandatory. You could actually comment that out or don't use it if you don't want to. But I tend to like it so I can see what's happening in the console as well. Line 16, we've got the document.getElementById, and the ID is the result. So if you go into the HTML here, this is what it's referring to. Okay, so it's getting the element by its result, and it's going to replace this div with the calculated value of the BMI using the inner.html. It will set the value of the BMI based on the calculated input. So that is basically it. So I'm just going to save this, and then we can test to make sure everything works. So I'm going to open up the directory here and click on this BMI HTML file, this one. So each time you have Terraform, it is the HTML file that you run. And don't forget that from the HTML file, I have linked both the CSS and the JavaScript. So I'm just going to double click on that, and we can see. So I'm just going to test it. So height in centimeters, so I say 177. Kilogram, I say maybe 85. I click calculate, and you can see the value there. Okay, so we've got our BMI calculator working as designed. So that's it for this project. If you have any issues whatsoever, please do not hesitate to contact me. I'll be more than happy to help you. Take care and all the best. Bye.